And we'll go ahead and get started. We're so glad you're all here. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, where you're calling from, what you're looking forward to learning this evening, and just welcome. We're glad you're here. So my name is Becca Pugh, and I'm a program coordinator with Peace Catalyst International here in the Washington, D.C. area. And we are a global organization of peacemakers following Jesus, seeking the peace of our communities with our Muslim neighbors and friends. And we envision local movements of peacemaking between Muslims and Christians and others in our communities throughout the world, and particularly in the US. And so I've been here working in the DC area for the past year alongside Hurunnessa. And we're just excited to share more about our peace building work together. What has motivated us, how we've seen some of the growth and relationships building through our peace building work, and ways that all of us can step out and reach across social divisions and even just people who are different from us to build authentic relationship and seek the peace of our communities. So I will introduce Hurunnessa, and I'm not going to get everything because this woman is incredible and she is a leader in so many facets, but just a few of the things that she is leading and working in are, she's the head of Interfaith and Outreach at the Al Dulles Area Muslim Society in Sterling, Virginia, which is the second largest mosque in the US. She's also the founder and co-host of the Sister Act podcast, which is a multi-faith women-led podcast of Christian, Muslim, and Jewish women leaders talking about topics of faith, life, and everything in between. She also sits on the board of equity, racial equity, and interfaith for Fairfax County. And there are several other things which I will let her tell you guys about, but so glad that you're here, Hurunnessa, and just excited for us to share more about our work together.
Thank you so much, Becca. That was a really sweet introduction. Good evening. My name is Hurunnessa, and I'm really glad to be here tonight and talk about the work that Becca and I have been doing, and the work that really is necessary in so many different angles on so many different fronts, that we need to be working together with everyone around us so that we can get this work really established for the younger generation of our children who are growing up in this country and around the world, who really need a better place to live. And it's incumbent upon us as people of faith to do that and to work together and really be there for one another. So I'm really excited to be here and talk about some of the things that we've been doing.
Yeah, so we wanted to kind of share just different things that we've done together over the past year. And so I'll kind of let Hurunnessa share a little bit, and then I'll also talk a little bit about some of our work. But so Hurunnessa, if you had to put it into words, how would you describe the ways that we've collaborated for peace and social transformation in DC over the past year together? And how would you, oh my gosh. Oh, was I muted?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. And yeah, and how would you describe the value of interfaith reconciliation and peace building, especially considering the fact that, you know, I technically come from an evangelical Christian background, and there are many Muslims who also, you know, want to share our faith with each other, their faith with each other. And so, yeah, what does it look like for us to kind of cross those bridges and build authentic relationship with each other, given that, you know, we are evangelical and we have a desire to share our faith with each other?
Right. So I think we met the beginning of 2019 before you actually moved to the DC area. And so before you actually came on, I've been working with Peace Catalyst for about 2.5 years now. And I didn't have an evangelical Christian counterpart here in the DMV since I'm the Muslim rep. And so a lot of the work I ended up having to do on my own and talking to Rick Love. or Martin or Rebecca. And so it was just really a whirlwind of things that we ended up having to do with people who were outside of the DMV area. So when you came on, I was like, yay, finally I get a partner that I could work with. And when we met, we just like really meshed really well. Our personalities were in line, and, we just end up always laughing and having a really good time and getting to know one another. And that's so important when you're building relationships, is to kind of, leave the surface stuff to the side and really get to know one another. And I'm very open about my story and my life. And so when I met you and when we were talking, it just seemed really nice for it to flow the way it did, even though there's a huge age gap between you and myself. Not that anybody here needs to know how old I am, but it's I'm just putting it out there. um, and so, when we first started working and me trying to get to know you and the work that we've been doing, it was so important that we were both on the same page in terms of what our ultimate goal was. And that was to build a relationship between not just you and I, but also between people of our faiths, and a lot of misconceptions that are really there, right? When you look at the evangelical Christian community and what misconceptions they have about Islam, and then when you look at a Muslim community, the Muslim community, and what misconceptions they have about the evangelical community, and vice versa, you really get to see the things that are being said as topics of conversation. And so when we're together and we're having these conversations and we're, getting rid of these misconceptions, it really goes a long way, because we're actually interpreting that and we're actually giving that back out to the community. So when we decided to do our first event, which was on Mary, Mother of Jesus, we were intentional on that project. We wanted to make sure that people who were coming and listening were really getting the overall different perspectives about Mary and who she is in the Christian faith and who she is in the Muslim faith. And it was even, we went even a little deeper, and we had people from the Methodist faith come, people from the Catholic faith come, and, the discrepancies between the different Christian denominations and what that meant. And I learned so much, the audience learned so much, and then the Muslim perspective. And at the end, we actually had the Baptist priest come and tell me, he's like, I didn't even know you guys even knew about Mary, or that you guys even have Mary, or that you even have one chapter of your Holy Quran out of the 114 chapters named after Mary, and how revered she is in our faith and how much love and respect we have for her as being Mother of Jesus, that he was astonished himself. And he's a learned person, right? So again, there's so many commonalities between our two faiths that a lot of people don't know. But when we put on these events, it's really to get things down to the nitty gritty of, look how many things we have in common. There are very few things that are different between our faiths, and those aren't things that will actually break our relationships. We use our love and respect for one another to actually go even further and do even more and go deeper into conversation, because my objective as a Muslim is not to convert you, Becca, and your objective, although you are from an evangelical Christian perspective, have never tried to convert me. So we're safe in that respect. But that is key, because when you're working with people, you don't want to feel as if someone's trying to impose their views on you. Rather, what you want is them to listen to what you have to say and then say, oh, that's really cool. I learned something new. I really did not know that. That's a really cool thing, even if you don't agree with it. The whole idea behind this conversation and this relationship is to love and respect and to move forward with these people who have differences in opinion on certain things. But if we get caught up in this idea that, oh, now I'm going to convert this person because I feel like she needs to be saved, the dynamic falls apart. So this love and respect that we're supposed to have with one another has to be established from the get-go between the people that you're talking to. And I felt that right away with you.
That's so sweet. Oh my gosh. Just thinking about our friendship over the past year is, it's really beautiful. And yeah, I think you said it so well. Like, it's about building real relationships with people. And whenever there's like if you're coming into a conversation with somebody and there's some kind of agenda, then it kind of puts a false pretense about why you're there to connect with that person, and it puts up a wall that can hinder real connection, because you're not really getting to know that person for who they are. You're just kind of seeing them as an object of, you know, whatever you're trying to accomplish. So,
and if
yeah.
both of your objectives are the non-preaching type of dialogue, then it'll work, right? Because I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is what Islam says, you need to follow this path, or you're going to burn in hell and all this other stuff. Because that conversation, first of all, it's not my personality. I don't get into preaching in the first place, number one. Number two, that's not conversation to connect with people at all. If I'm going to come and talk to you about how your life is so messed up because you're not on the right path, I'm not building a relationship with you. If anything, I'm condemning you and putting you down and making you feel less worthy of a human being. And as a Muslim, it's not my job to do that, nor is it something that God wants. Because in the Quran, he's very specific. Guidance comes to through God, and God guides whom he pleases. And we all have different paths to God, right? We all have different paths, and we have to respect each other. Right? The number one thing for Muslims, and I can't emphasize this enough, as our job as Muslims is to worship God. That is what we were created for, is to worship God, not to go around and convert people. I mean, if we look at our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his examples, he had Christian friends, Jewish friends, people from different faith. He wasn't sitting around trying to convert them. He actually showed the moral of that is that to show Islam through your actions and your words, right? Because people will see what your faith is all about through that, right? But to sit here and have this dialogue about conversion really takes the essence of your relationship to a totally different perspective and to a different area that I really don't ever go into. So my whole concept behind the work that I do in my multi-faith space as the head of outreach and interfaith in the second largest mosque in the country is to build relationship and to get to know my fellow human beings and to respect them, and vice versa. And you have to be real, because people can see the fakeness instantly, you know, and you have to be able to be vulnerable and not just talk about, you know, religious stuff all the time. And, you know, we can get into that too, because you and I share a lot of personal dialogue as well. You know, like sometimes I'll text you, be like, oh my God, Becca, can you believe this happened? You know, and then you'll start like laughing, and then somehow it turns into a joke or like whatever it is. And, you know, like we have that personal relationship where I can text you 2:00 in the morning and be like, you know, this is what happened. Like, I'm so frustrated about something. But if we didn't have that dialogue, if we didn't build on that relationship where we became personal, it would have never gotten there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so true. I love that. Oh my gosh, text at 2 a.m. We all need friends, don't we? That we can text at 2 a.m.
And the fact that I don't think about, oh my God, she's Christian, she's not going to understand what I'm coming from, is ludicrous, because almost 99% of what you and I talk about is something both you and I can go through as human beings, right? Our faith is not the issue that's actually outlining the conversation. It's the fact that you and I are human being, and I can talk to you about, you know, this is what happened with my kids, or this is what happened, you know, at work. And, you know, we can have that conversation as women, right? Even the work that we're doing as women is an issue that we talk about, and how we're not given space by men. And I have a problem with that as well. But, you know, the conversations are so important, and you need to be vulnerable with the person you're talking to. You need to be able to connect to them on a personal level. And one of the things that I love about our relationship is that you and I go out and we eat together. We'll do things outside of just phone calls. You know, I get to, you know, meet people that are important in your life, and then you introduce me to your other friends. Like I met David through you, and last year was his graduation. He started working at the Holocaust Museum here in DC, and he invited me and you to his graduation. And I thought that was such a beautiful thing. And I went and I had such a great time. And, you know, David and his wife, Michelle, are a dear, close family to me. And that's because we built that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just, and I think that those like real relationships are what make our communities stronger. And that's like what builds real peace And I think resilience too, because whenever you have these real, genuine relationships with each other, then, you know, if something comes up in our shared communities, then we can come alongside each other as, you know, fellow community members, as brothers and sisters in faith, and say, like, I'm here for you to support you. We can face this together. Like, I remember, Hurunnessa, you mentioned a case, I think it was several years ago. You can probably speak to it more, but there was a young Muslim woman who was killed near the Adams Mosque. And it was a horrific incident. And I know that you were working on coming up with a community resilience plan where groups and people from other faith communities could come alongside the Muslim community in times like that and provide support in whatever ways they can, whether it's, you know, if they have mental health care professionals or people that can just come alongside to seek healing together as a community, and also create structures that would prevent something like that from happening again. And I believe that when we really come together as fellow human beings, then it creates stronger, more resilient, and more peaceful communities in that way.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, when you know, strive to make connections with people and be there for them, that adds on to the relationship. That makes it even
Yes.
more important for you to keep up with that person, because you really want them in your life. You really want them to be there when something happens, or even when nothing happens, just calling them up and having a conversation, or going out to eat with them, or, you know, taking a cruise, because I was talking to you about taking the cruise in DC. I had like all these ideas going around, and I was like, oh, the monument opened, we should go to the monument too. I'm all about doing stuff. And so it has to be practical, right? But my relationship with you has to be genuine. I really would need to show that to you, that I genuinely care for you. And I saw that when Nabra was killed in 2017, was a girl in our community. And, you know, the multi-faith community just poured with love. They came and asked us what we needed and really were there for us. And, you know, a lot of the times these people, we just know them from the multi-faith work that we do, but you don't really get to know them. You know, like I can't say I know all of them. I know most of them. If I see if I approach them and then they, you know, reciprocate that approach, then we can go out, have dinner or lunch and have a phone conversation, get to know one another, and, you know, meet each other's family. It builds on that, right? But you need to have both parties being able and wanting to have that relationship. And this relationship building technique is so key in the evangelical Christian and Muslim community, because there's so much misinformation, especially in the Islamophobia campaign. There's about $35 million rotating every year just to promote Islamophobia, and we're countering that. A majority of that $35 million is going back into the evangelical Christian community, in what the preachers are saying about Islam, the, you know, propagandas that are actually out there about who we are and what it is we do. And the only way a lot of them are going to talk to us is if we want to convert. Otherwise, they don't want to have any multi-faith work. So you have to work around that. What does that mean? I don't ever shut anyone down who wants to have a conversation with me. I had one lady, you know, from West Virginia come about a year and a half ago or so. And I tell the story a lot because it's really funny. And she walked through the door and she wanted to come and visit, but she was really scared. And she said, you know, my husband really didn't want me to come. And so I asked her, why wouldn't your husband want to come? Because I could tell she was really afraid. And she was just like looking around like, oh my God, what am I going to expect? And she's like, well, he didn't want me to come because he thought that you were going to convert me. And so, you know, me being who I am, I said, well, we convert people on Thursdays. It's Tuesday, so you're safe, you know? And, you know, her eyes went wide open and she started laughing. Then she just looked at me like, what? I'm like, that's not our job. Like, no one's going to convert you here. You know, that's not how we work. Again, it's the misconception that she had. And if she did not take that initiative to come to Adams, and if I did not respond to her, or I did not allow our doors to be open, that conversation would have never happened. Because by the time she left, she said, oh, I want to come back. I want to bring my friends. I have, you know, I learned so much from you. I have such a different perception about Muslims. Thank you so much for having me. Again, it's one person, but the impact is so great because now she's going to go and tell her friends about who we are, and they might want to come and learn and build a relationship. So it's all about having your doors open and being genuine and respecting the other person. You don't know what they're coming from, or where they're coming from, because everyone has their life, and they come with certain perceptions about certain people. So you have to be open to that and not take everything, especially criticism, as a negative thing. You have to just let them speak, and they want to be heard. That's important. So we need to be hearing people out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so I also want to go into, what motivates us. I mean, we've already you've shared about this a little bit, but I know, like, even from a faith perspective, like for me as a Christian, it's like there is a mandate in the Bible to, as far as it depends on me, to make peace with everybody who's around me. And, Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." And so there's both a mandate and a blessing for peacemaking. And so, we as Christians also believe that everyone is created in the image of God, and therefore has inherent, worth, dignity, and value. And so from that perspective, it's reaching out and recognizing the image of God in every single person, even those who are different from us, or believe differently from us, or practice differently from us. And so it's really, and it's a command too from Jesus when he said, love your neighbor as yourself, and love your enemy, and bless those who persecute you, like all these things. And regardless, even if that person, you wouldn't define them as an enemy, if they're your neighbor, you're called to love them. And so I know for me, that's a big motivation from the faith perspective. And just in my background too, having studied peace building, that's kind of a big part of my worldview, is just wanting humanity to come together and recognize that, we're better together, and we should all be loving each other as fellow human beings. And that we can create a more just and a safer world for everybody in
Absolutely.
that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Our faith is the driving force in all the things that we do. I know it is for yourself. It is for me. I try to do at least the best that I can to do things that would make God happy with me. And because I've noticed, at least in my life, when I do that, I have more peace within myself. I have more patience in life. I'm able to get through the day, because life is taxing. When we think about it, there's a lot of problems. And I don't know, if I didn't have God in my life, where I would be. To be honest with you, it's my anchor. And just for those who don't know, I'm a single mom of 4 kids, and my eldest is 20 and my youngest is almost 12, and they're with me 24/7. They don't see their father. Just in that area alone, it's really like a test all the time. And I speak for the single moms out there, because it's, we sometimes play it off as like, oh, it's nothing. It's a lot of work, to be honest with you, and it's taxing, and it's tiring, and it's emotionally draining. But I use God in my life as a healing, and as a protection, and as something that calms me, because for us, this world is just a test, and we all have to pass our test, and each test is so different. And our connections with human beings are part of that test, whether it's our family or our friends or people from other faith, because the respect and the acknowledgement of other people doesn't just stop with people in your own faith. We have to give that out to everybody else. We have to be mindful that the God that created me created them as well, and that I have to give them all the rights and respect that I would want to be given to me. And that, when we do that, that makes God happy, right? And even the work that we're doing right now, this is something in both our faiths where we can say that when God sees this, it makes him happy, because we're bringing people together. We're bringing understanding, commonalities, focusing on our relationship, so that we're not wasting time on the nitty-gritty of things, but we're using our relationship to help others. So you and I have been doing all these, program dialogue to bring conversations between people who don't understand our faith. I also work with an evangelical pastor in West Virginia to attack the opioid issue with the Jewish community from DC. And that I've been doing for a while now, because it's not just dialogue. It's not just have a conversation. It's about actually going out and doing things that is impacting our community. Opioid is an issue that's plaguing all of our faith groups, every one of us. With Peace Catalyst, we are working with the Muslim community in Boise, Idaho, to build relationship with law enforcement, PCI, evangelical Christians through PCI and the Muslim community in other cities all across the country are working together for whatever issues they're dealing with in their city so that they can be a better community. And that is so important, because the relationship that you build with people when you open your door and you open your heart and you open your house really makes the work that you're doing outside so much easier, because you already know that person. You already have a relationship with them, and you do that one project, and then you realize there's so many more projects that come up, whether it's homelessness or women's rights or domestic violence. All these things plague all of our faith groups. There's not one faith group that you can tell me that does not have domestic violence as an issue, which next month, starting tomorrow, is DV month, right? This is something that's affecting all of us. We know so many people within our families that are going through domestic violence. How are we getting this message across? I go into a synagogue and I go into the restroom, and behind the door, there's a whole, like a flyer of like, oh, if you're a domestic violence victim, this is the number you call. And then there's some things in Hebrew. And then if I go into a church, the same thing. And I'm like, oh, wow, look, like, faith organizations are actually doing work without, putting that person in jeopardy. So stuff like that, we need to work together. We need to learn from one another. We need to use our resources. What I lack, you have a strength in, and what you lack, I might have a strength in. But that's part of life, right? So you work together to really ameliorate the situation of people around you who don't have the voice to speak.
Wow. Yeah, that's so powerful. And you're right, like we have so many concerns, like shared concerns in our communities that affect everyone, and how much more effective can we be if we come together to tackle those issues that are facing all of us. And I guess Hurunnessa, if we had to put into words like practical advice for others,
what would that be?
Yeah.
So when I first got asked to be part of PCI about 2.5 years ago, I ended up going to Duke University for a weekend program that we had. And it's the first time I met everyone at PCI. And I just thought, wow, these Christians are so nice, they're so welcoming, they're so kind. They don't even know me. And this is just, different, because, people have perceptions about people until they meet them, right? And then on top of that, these were like evangelical Christians that I'm meeting in another state by myself as a visibly Muslim person. And I just couldn't believe the amount of genuine love that I felt in from everyone there. One of the things that stuck out was during prayer time, and that they would always have prayer in the schedule for us, because we pray 5 times a day. And a lot of people forget that, but they had that scheduled in throughout the program. And there's this one guy named Bill, who every time I see, I'm just like, can I just sit next to Bill, because he's just so awesome. He's like, I forgot, maybe in the 60s or 70s. And anytime the Muslims would get up and pray, he would go behind them and he would pray with them too. Not because anybody forced him, but he's like, he would stand up, or he would just stay on his knees and he would just pray. He had no idea what they were saying because it's in Arabic, but I felt his connection to God without him losing his own faith. It didn't mean that he was becoming a Muslim. It didn't mean that he was losing faith as a Christian. It meant that he really connected to God so much that he felt a connection even more praying with us. And that I see with Brother Charles all the time, who's on this video also, who isn't Muslim, right? But who loves his faith, who exudes his faith. And I see him at Adams, and he's helping out in so many different ways. And I myself am amazed about from thinking about what a genuine human being he is. And for me to get to know someone like that, it really gives me a lot to think about. You know, what am I doing better that I can be like him? And so words of advice or things that we can take away from is, you know, be genuine in what it is you want to do, and keep your heart open, and the right people will come in your life. I have seen that when you are, you know, just who you want to be and your belief is strong in whatever it is, God will bring the right people in your life to do the right work. And I can't say that enough on so many different fronts in my life, but at least in this work that I'm doing, you came into my life, Becca, doing this work and trying to help bring people together and trying to fix at least some issues that our communities are going through. And, you know, healing is so important, and healing through just connecting as human beings is so crucial, that I think a lot of us have forgotten how to do that. We're so, you know, distracted by the stuff that's going around us in our lives that we forget to just stop and have a conversation with someone and ask them how their day is doing and empathize with them. So I think just keeping your heart open and being true to yourself and knowing that your faith is as strong as it can be, working with people from different faith groups.
That's so great. So well said. Yeah, and I would add to just having courage, you know, like not being afraid, like you're saying, and just having courage to step out and not being afraid that you're going to lose, you know, your identity. by
I'll tell you a short story. So about 2.5 years ago, I was invited to the prayer breakfast in DC, and you know, I went to one of the luncheons, and I was the only Muslim female in that whole huge Hilton hotel room, and everyone in there was like 96% evangelical Christians from all over the US. And I walked in and half of them were like, oh, you know, like, who's she? You know? So when I get put into that situation, I know exactly how to react. I just start speaking English really loud. My New York side comes out and I'm just like, hi, how are you? So nice to meet you. And they're like, oh my God, she speaks English. So when I went and I sat at my table, people were, you know, the people at my table were just, you know, at first, because it was way back inside the room, they didn't see me first. And I went in and they were like, oh, you know, hi, do you need a seat? Like they were talking to me as if I didn't speak English. And I was just like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to sit here. And the guy just like his mouth dropped, you know, but I'm so used to that because there's a perception that people have. And my job is to counter that perception. And so then we started talking about what it is I'm doing. And then like I became friends with all of them and they all added me on Facebook. So, you know, it became this whole other thing. But it's that ability to go into a space that you don't feel that you're comfortable in, like you said, courage, and really being genuine to yourself. Because if it wasn't the fact that I'm an extrovert, I would have had a hard time being in that room during a lunch event when I was the only female Muslim in that whole, I don't know, there was like over 1,500 people in that lunch. And so it's really amazing how God gives you that courage, right? And you talked about that, but you really have to believe in yourself too, because you can do it.
Yeah, so well said. Great. Yeah. Well, Hurunnessa, was there anything else you wanted to add or any questions you wanted to ask me before we open up for audience Q&A?
I think I'm good. I talked a lot already. We'll go to the Q&A. Same thing I talked about.
Okay, great. And I'm appreciating the nods from everyone. I can tell everyone's like very actively listening. I love that.
If you have a good audience, they're active and participating.
Yeah, great audience. So if anyone would like to ask a question, feel free to, if we can just do one at a time, one question per person, just feel free to unmute yourself, or you can also type it in the chat and then I can read the questions from there too.
I'm going to ask a question to Hurunnessa. What do you actually do in the Adams Center to encourage people to come and visit? Is there something that you do proactively that's part of your position to invite people? I mean, you know, maybe before COVID world or hopefully in the future. Just wanted to know.
Yeah, you know, when I do my events, I send those out to everyone in our email list, and that actually sometimes brings in people from different parts of Virginia, sometimes from Maryland, who've never been in a mosque before. And the way we even market it is in a way where people could feel that they're welcome, because like when we had our Mary Mother of Jesus event, it was at Adams, and a lot of people came from Maryland. They're like, I drove over an hour to come here. And I was like, wow, that's dedication. And so, you know, it's the multi-faith work, to be honest with you, is not something that you're going to get thousands of people overnight. It just doesn't happen that way. And unfortunately, it has turned into a type of work that sometimes you hit 1 or 2 or 3 people at a time. And I like that because it becomes a personal thing. But at the same time, when you're thinking like, oh, you want to make an impact, you're not making that impact. But it's not about numbers, it's about quality, right? So when you're making your events, make sure that you're targeting other people outside of the Muslim community. So for instance, we're starting a series for the next 4 Tuesdays in October. I'm moderating an event called, we titled it 401 Years, an intentional look into the history of racism in the United States. And this is our mosque doing it. And that's because we realize the Muslim community really doesn't know the history of racism in this country. And so it is our job to teach them, but it's open to everyone else. And when we're looking at the registration, we're seeing a lot of people from different faith groups registering. It's going to be on our Facebook Live, at Adam's Facebook page as well. So anyone can access that information, but it's going to be me moderating. And I specifically picked a female speaker because when I'm given the opportunity to moderate an event, I will choose the female first. And that's intentional. Because like I said, women don't get spaces to speak, and I will always usually choose the women over the man any day. And but that in and of itself is, you're targeting a specific area of content that you're trying to give out to the community, but it's open to anyone who wants to come. So all of our multi-faith partners get that email, they will get the flyer, they will know about the event. They can even come later on and watch it after the recording, because it'll be on our Facebook Live. So you have to be intentional in the things that you're putting out and the information that you're giving, so that people from different walks of life might want to be interested in seeing that. But I would actually love to add on to that, would love to see people at the younger age get into multi-faith work, because it seems like a lot of the time the multi-faith work is for people who are more like 50 and above and not younger. Because, you know, people are trying to go to school, get married, have kids. Who has time for all this multi-faith work at that point? It just seems more of something that, you know, the older generation is trying to get into, but I'm trying to change that, at least with the people around me. I do have, because I do have a music background, I do have the only mosque youth choir in the whole country. And we started that about, I would say 4.5 years ago. So I have girls and boys who sing you know, nasheeds, they sing American pop culture songs. They are invited to churches and synagogues. And, you know, had it not been for this choir, they would have never known what Shabbat services is. They would not know what, you know, Mass would be like, because they have to sit through that sometimes. They have been to so many different churches. And, you know, a lot of these churches have their own youth choir, but they will invite us to come and sing. You know, some of these events, they've met Nancy Pelosi through them. They've been, you know, asked to sing at the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts. And that's because they take their work seriously. So we have to find innovative ways to get people involved in multi-faith work, especially the younger generation. So we have to think outside the box.
May I ask a question? Yes. Okay. Before I ask it, because it might be a little bit provocative, I want to preface it by saying, you know, I'm a program director with Catalyst, and I go out of my way to meet new Muslim people and to become friends with them. And one of the first things I tell them, as you have already emphasized, is I'm not trying to convert you to Christianity. I'm an evangelical Christian. I'm not trying to convert you to Christianity. I just enjoy meeting people who take their faith in God seriously. Okay. That said, Becca, you emphasize that we have a mandate as evangelical Christians to try to make peace. We also have a mandate to gain assurance that the people we encounter have some assurance of their eternal destiny. So if I were talking to you personally, Hurunnessa, I might tell you that for me to love you as I love my brothers requires me to be concerned about your eternal destiny. So my question is, how have you handled those issues in a way that is mutually acceptable between Muslims and Christians?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I really love that question. And honestly, I let the conversation happen. I never stop anyone trying to talk about their faith to me, because I feel that that's a segue in us having a relationship. And if they feel that that's such an important thing to talk about, I never cut them off. I don't say, well, I don't have time for this, or I already know that, or no, I'm not going to convert. I let them speak and have them say what they have to say, so they feel validated. And I want them to feel validated, that the points and the ideas that they're trying to bring across is well received from me. Whether I agree with them or not is a whole other subject, but I want them to feel validated that what they're trying to say is heard by me. And so I let them speak, I listen, and I say, okay, that's really a lot of great things to think about. And I do go home and I think about it. And then I might call them up later and say, well, thank you so much for this. And I really appreciated you talking to me about it. I feel really humbled that you're worried about my well-being, that you would give me this information. And so I really am grateful for that. And then from that, we just go on, because they know that they've done their duty by telling me. Whether I take it or not is up to me. Right. But I would never, as a practicing Muslim, try to shut someone down who's trying to give me information, because I know they're trying to come from a good place, and I have to look at it from that. And then the conversation, it goes, you could make it go bad real fast. Right. Yeah. But that's not my objective, because I do want to have a relationship with that person. And so me not stopping them, me allowing them to talk, me allow them to say what they have to say, makes them feel validated. And it has happened before, where people have been talking to me about what they think I should be doing. And I appreciate that. I really wholeheartedly do. And then, the conversation always shifts after that. Right. So normally I would say, well, I know this really great restaurant. If you want to go eat, let's go talk over there. And then we go, and then we start talking about life and what that means. And, the person might even tell me something about the Bible. And I love hearing it, because I'm learning as well. And, that other part of the conversation where they feel that they have to convert me never goes any further than that, because I've allowed them to speak. I gave them that space, and that's all they wanted.
I would follow up by saying, I approach that issue, again, not with the goal of trying to convert anybody, but to try to come to some understanding that we mutually agree upon as to what does it mean to acquire assurance of your eternal destiny. And I believe that is possible.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm just curious to know, I think you probably have had a lot more experience at this than I have. And
yes,
so
I mean, and a lot of the time the dialogue ends up happening between, comparing Quranic texts and Christian texts about that, and what that means, and how I'm convinced about what's going to happen to me, and what's the life to come, and what that means in my relationship with God. And when we have that conversation, it makes the other person, sometimes I talk about something they might have not known before, and for them it's like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that that's what you believe in, and that's what's going to happen in your faith, and the process of everything that's happening and leading up to that point. What does it mean, and your destiny, whatever that may be, in terms of your faith and what you're believing. It definitely is something that I've had this conversation with Dr. Rick Love many times. But, just the way he approached the whole conversation was really, like you said, from just making me understand my own faith more, making me understand my purpose in life. And that was a beautiful conversation, because you sometimes need someone to guide you, right? By the words they say, hey, what about this? What do you think about that? And it makes you think like, oh yeah, that's something to think about. How does my faith address this issue? And then you go out and you research, or you might already know the answer, but it's another thing to have a dialogue on and really have a common understanding of where that actually fits in your life.
Yeah.
But thank you, Michael.
I would love to have a conversation with you maybe one-on-one to see how we would accomplish that goal together.
Sure, absolutely. Anytime.
All
Would
right.
love to do that. Yeah. What part of Florida are you in?
I'm in a city called Deltona, which is halfway between Orlando and Daytona Beach.
Okay, are you near the beach? Because I love the beach. Maybe we can meet in Florida.
I can get to the beach in about 30 minutes.
See, there you go. Becca, we're getting on a plane and going to Florida, okay?
Let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah. That would be awesome.
If I want to go to the beach,
it's
30 minutes away. If I want to go to Disney, it's 30 minutes away. If I want to avoid the traffic, I just stay home.
Okay, well, you're in the right place.
I am.
I see a question from Anna, so I'm going to read that from the chat. And I just wanted to also add to that, what you were saying, Hurunnessa, to Michael's question, that I find my friendships with Muslims are so much like richer when we can just have those open conversations of like, this is what I believe and this is what I think. And, you know, because then we're just having an honest, genuine connection about our life and, you know, what we're going through. And
absolutely,
like with you,
yeah, you don't need to be, or like trying to give the other person the answer you think they want to hear.
Exactly.
Then you're just, you know, washing it down and not really being yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So I see a question from Anna in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
She said, in terms of your PCI work, what are you most looking forward to in the next year? That's a great question, Anna. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we applied for that grant, you know.
Yeah, we did.
That would be great. So
tell us more. No, I can explain it.
So George Duke had a grant application for organizations to apply, where you would actually expand and volumize the American Muslim narrative to the rest of the country. And there are about 17, I think, of these grants. And so we passed phase 1 out of 146 people. I think they picked 50, and PCI was one of those. So next round, I think the final list of the 17 will be released in November. And not only that, because I'm involved with PCI, but because I have the only youth choir, a mosque youth choir in the whole country, we were able to use Adams Beat as one of the partnering entities for the grant under PCI, because we've already done so much work in expanding the American Muslim narrative, showing people who Muslims are and what that means and the different things that they've been doing and being exposed to, and how it's really helped their self-esteem, whether they're girls wearing hijab or no hijab. They're on my choir, they're standing up, they're presenting who we are. And so it touches on so many different levels of positive reinforcement that we're trying to give our kids, but at the same time, it's teaching the rest of America about who we are. One of the songs I taught my kids is a Hebrew song of peace, and they actually sang that in a synagogue, and they had all the old ladies come crying to them, like, oh my God, you know, you melted my heart, you sing it better than our choir. And for my kids, that was just like, oh my God, we sang it good, like we pronounced everything right. It made them feel really good about themselves. So I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with this grant, because we're going to use it to actually have a whole curriculum of performing arts in the theater and music. We're going to have some done in Louisville, Kentucky with their performing arts, and then here in DC with us and some Jewish and Muslim composers that I know personally that we're going to work with. So it's going to be a multi-faith working together to really give out the American Muslim narrative to everybody else who's going to listen to it. It's going to be a curriculum that other people can use, and, you know, targeting the youth, especially in making sure that they're part of this, and that they're part of, you know, even building the script. So it's about a 2.5-3 year project, and I'm really excited about that. If COVID was not happening, I think we would have been traveling somewhere soon. So that's sad that we haven't been traveling so much so this year. Last year I went to Seattle with PCI, and we did some group work there. But I was thinking about this whole Sarajevo, Bosnia trip too, before COVID. But next year, if there's another trip, I definitely want to be a part of that, because, you know, learning about other people and their experiences is important for self-growth as well.
And that trip has gone virtual for anyone who's interested. I'll send you the info for that.
Yes.
And also just wanted to plug Hurunnessa and I, in addition to that amazing project, we're also co-leading a scriptural reasoning group together every other week on Zoom. And basically we just read the different holy texts alongside each other and then reflect and discuss together. So if you're interested, just feel free to send us an email and we'll loop you into that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I'm also excited for when we can be in person again.
Yes, absolutely. You know, being in person and meeting someone face to face is so much, I mean, so different than Zoom and all these online platforms that we're using to meet people, although it's great that we have it instead of not having it. But I'm really praying that this COVID thing ends soon and that we can go back to our normal way of life and actually interacting with one another, you know, like humans, you know, seeing each other. It gives us that peace and makes us feel better as well.
Yeah. Well, I think we have time for one more question, if anyone has.
So I actually have a question for you, Becca.
Yes.
What made you get into this work? Because, you know, for all the reasons how difficult it might be for a lot of people, especially coming from an evangelical Christian background.
Yes.
What made you get into this and why do you do the work that you do?
Oh, thanks for asking me. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I'll try not to be long-winded because it's kind of a long story, but part of my journey to wanting to engage across faith groups kind of began actually with my undergraduate course study. I was in Jordan and I was studying Arabic language for my degree and studying Arab-Israeli conflict and Jordanian history, all these different things. And I was living with a Muslim host family. And, I had never really thought about the Muslim community that much before living with a host family. And but I I think carried a lot of preconceived notions based on the culture that I grew up in, mostly relating to 9/11 or terrorism, kind of this generalized perspective of who Muslims are. And when I lived with this host family, they totally transformed my worldview, and just they were the most beautiful, loving, sweet, kind, and caring people. And they showed me that we actually have so much in common, both faith-wise and culturally, that it shook me in the best way. I just loved getting to become part of their family. And so that's kind of where my journey started. And then continuing onward, still growing in my faith as a Christian, as an evangelical Christian, but then coming into more conversations within my own community about peacemaking and the need for reconciliation across different social divisions within our country and across the world, and just how important that is, especially when we see people kind of isolating themselves more and more and becoming less and less engaged across difference, and wanting to be to be able to say that I have seen the importance of building relationships across faith lines, and I've seen the beauty of it, and I've seen how important that is for our world, and I want to continue building that and being a part of that. So that's a really short version, but it's kind of part of it.
It's great. It's really good to know the history behind things and how they actually end up coming to be, right? You'd be surprised about what you learn. But thank you so much for having me. I had a great time tonight.
Thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
I think Charles wanted to say something.
I just wanted to say I am so deeply moved and impressed by the fundamental humanity of the spirit of this entire evening together. And I'm not thinking of it in terms of this faith or that faith or even interfaith, but just the fundamental humanity, which is a gift of the Creator to all of us, to each of us and to all of us. And I'm just so thankful to everybody here, particularly the most articulate Sister Hurunnessa.
You're so sweet, Charles. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you were here and I got to see you. Yeah, it takes a village to do the work we're doing, so I'm glad that I have all of you with me. Thank you.
Hurunnessa.
Oh, thank you, Becca. So it was great to see you and work with you. And thanks for everybody for joining. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if you need my contact information for anything, Becca has it. I'm also on social media under my name, so you can find me there as well.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. Bye.